So, hello class. For today's video lecture, we will be discussing contemporary global governance. Now, pag sinabi nating contemporary global governance, so it refers to the entirety of regulations, meaning laws, policies, institutions that try to solve problems among nations. So you would see that problems like poverty, human rights, and the environment problems, climate change, problems that are wide in scope are actually discussed and they are studied in the hopes of finding solutions to these problems um, is what we call contemporary global governance. Now, one good example of um, global governance is the presence or the existence of what we call the United Nations. And I'm very sure you have studied the United Nations before. So basically, it is an international organization which is founded in 1945. Later on, bibigyan natin siya uh, ng context pa. And currently, it's made up of 193 member states. Now, before we continue with the United Nations, there actually is a predecessor uh, for the United Nations, and it is what we call the League of Nations. Okay, so it was established in 1919 under the Treaty of Versailles. Now, the Treaty of Versailles, okay, is actually something, or it is a treaty that outlined the conditions of peace for Germany. So during this time, it's actually created during World War I when Germany ay medyo aggressive towards France. So it tried to occupy a number of territories in France. So kaya nagkaroon ng gera. So the Germans versus the allies, which was led by United States, France, and the United Kingdom. So after World War One, okay, so in June 28, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed in Paris, France, and it actually marked the end of World War One. So what the treaty contained are peace conditions for Germany. So if you would remember our previous discussions about intergovernmental organizations, the League of Nations, okay, is actually an intergovernmental organization which was created under the premise of a treaty, which is again the Treaty of Versailles. Now, past few years after the establishment of the League of Nations, okay, it actually lost its power, okay, nung nagkaroon ng mas malakas na influence ang mga Axis powers. And as per your history, world history, the Axis powers are composed of Germany, Italy, and Japan. Now, after the happenings, okay, and the wane or yung paghina ng influence ng League of Nations, eventually it led to the start of what we know today as World War II in 1939. But again, before there was a UN, there was actually what we call the League of Nations. Okay? Now, balik tayo sa United Nations. The term itself, United Nations, was coined by the US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, okay, in January 1st, 1942, just during the height of the Second World War. Now, the UN basically was founded in 1945 when the organizations were drafted sa first UN conference in San Francisco, California. So, uh, basically, wala. So basically, the UN as an international organization and an intergovernmental organization was created during World War II. It served as the alliance for the Allies during that time. Now, there are actually 6 official languages used in the United Nations. We have Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. Similar with any organization, it does have a several cores or main organs. By the way pala, just in case you are interested, the current General for the United Nations is Antonio Guterres. So he has been there since 2017. So I've included that on my notes. If you're interested, you can pull up the notes. I'll be uploading din sa ating Google Class. So, for your additional information. Now, again, going back, there are several main organs, so to speak, ng United Nations. So, we have the General Assembly, we have the Security Council, Economic and Social Council, Trusteeship Council, International Court of Justice, and the UN Secretariat as well. So, each of those organs or parts of the United Nations have been defined in our source material. So, I leave those parts to you para mabasa nyo rin siya. Okay? So, you may have heard these terms before. Okay? So, I'll be leaving this part for you to read. Okay? Anyway, it's just by definition. Now, basically, the role of the United Nations as an international and intergovernmental organizations is basically simple lang. And in general, first and foremost is to maintain international peace and security. Second is to protect human rights, deliver humanitarian aid whenever it is needed. Like for example, may mga refugees due to natural disasters or due to war. So, member states of the United Nations are required to deliver humanitarian aid, promote sustainable development, like with the environment and its concern for climate change or environmental degradation, and lastly, to uphold the international law. Now, what is the relevance of globalization and United Nations? So, sabi dun sa ating source material, okay, the United Nations as an international intergovernmental organization is there to basically fill up 5 gaps. Now, we have the knowledge gap, we have the normative gap, policy gap, institutional gap, and compliance gap. And each of those gaps, so to speak, are actually defined here. But I would like to suggest para mas maintindihan nyo kung ano-ano ba yung mga gaps na to na kailangang i-fill ng United Nations and how it is related to global governance or globalization in general. I'd like for you to look at my notes. So ang ginawa ko sa kanya is I gave an example that the United Nations is supposed to solve, okay, and how it fills those gaps. or those gaps, so to speak. Okay? So, I tried my best naman to make it as simple as possible here. So, again, tatandaan natin, in contemporary global governance, okay, um, we try to solve problems among nations. Okay? And the United Nations is a prime example of an organization that tries to solve those kinds of problems. Now, sinabi nga dito na they're trying to fill these 5 gaps. Okay? So, let's take for example a problem that affects most countries in the world, if not all. So, let's try to take a look into climate change or environmental degradation. So, ito yung gawin nating example. Paano ba i-apply ang global governance at ano yung relevance niya sa United Nations? So, sabi dito, the United Nations can fill these 5 gaps when trying to solve climate change as an example. Maraming problems on a global level, pero ito ang gawin nating example. So, climate change, environmental degradation. First is the knowledge gap. What the UN can do is pwede siya mag-provide ng platforms, resources that can explain ano ba yung causes ng environmental degradation and provide information dun sa kanyang mga members along with solutions kung paano maiiwasan or marireverse ang climate change. For example, the UN can hire experts from its different member countries to study environmental degradation and formulate solutions for that. Now, yung information na makukuha dun sa study na yon can be shared among its members. So, knowledge gap is filled. Paano naman ang normative gap? So, normative as defined dun sa source material is a pattern of behavior. So, in this example, the UN can mandate its members on what behavior ang dapat sundin or gawin in dealing with environmental degradation. For example, the UN can instruct its member countries to focus more on saving the environment by planting more trees, recycling, or any effort that can push forward solving environmental degradation. So, the UN can suggest basically to its member states on what they should do to solve this problem. Now, third is the policy gap. So, paano i-fill ng UN itong gap na to? So, the UN can force or coerce its members to become more environment-oriented sa kanilang policy at lawmaking. Like for example, members need to create more laws that are more focused in saving the environment and natural resources. So, dapat yung mga laws mo, okay, the laws of its member countries reflect policies that are suited for saving or conserving your environment. So, dun sa policy gap, okay, they can suggest to their members to create more environmental friendly laws. So, that way, na-fill up nila yung gap sa policy. Fourth is the institutional gap in which UN can allocate more resources to a certain country's environmental institution. Like, let's say, for example, since the Philippines is part of the UN, okay, for example, the UN can give more finances and additional knowledge sa ating DENR, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, to make sure that yung institution natin yun is able to handle the Philippines environmental concerns. So pwedeng mas mabigyan ang institution na to ng mas maraming funds to plant more trees, to make sure that meron tayong magandang waste management system. Okay? So na may make sure ng UN that the institutions in our respective country are equipped to handle environmental concerns. So that's how it fills the institutional gap. Now, the last gap is the compliance gap, in which the UN can give incentives to member states na sumusunod sa kanilang mga policies. Okay? Incentives can come in the form of grants, okay? Or more funds, so to speak. More opening up of trade with other member states. At the same time, it can also give punishments to members who refuse to cooperate with it. So pwedeng punishments can come in the form of withdrawals of funds. Hindi na namin popondohan yung mga institutions nyo na nagko-conserve sa environment kasi ayaw nyo namang sumunod, or pwedeng they can close up trades to other member countries. They can sanction, so to speak, trade from other countries kasi hindi ka nakikipag-cooperate. So the UN can give out incentives and punishments to its member states. Now, this is how the UN may tackle an international problem like environmental degradation. So, I tried to relate lang kung paano niya gagawin, since ang nasa handout lang natin is the basic definition of each. But class, please keep in mind, hindi lang to para sa environmental degradation. Marami tayong international problems like poverty, hunger, war, that can be related and applied to global governance and United Nations. So I just tried to give you an idea on how these gaps are filled up by the UN, and ano yung pwede niyang gawin to satisfy these gaps. Okay? So hindi lang kasi naman climate change ang problema, or hindi climate change is just one of the problems that affect most countries, if not all, in the world. Okay? So that's how global governance and the United Nations are related. Okay? So I leave the basic definitions for you to read, para at least alam nyo rin naman how each of them are defined. And then you can go back to my notes to see how it relates to the definition. Okay? So that would be it for our video discussion for this presentation. Again, if there would be any questions or clarifications, just let me know sa ating respective GCs. If you have questions, you can post it there, or you can send me a message. If there's something that you need clarification, just let me know, and then so that I may be able to adjust na rin para sa inyo. Hopefully this is a much more clearer presentation compared to our previous one. So again, these are video lectures that I created for our respective classes and section. So again, I would like to apologize. Medyo maraming stutters and stuff, but again, the main point of these video lectures is to make sure that we tackle these presentations. Okay? So, I think that would be it for me. Thank you so much for viewing, and I'll be seeing you on the next lecture. Okay? Thanks. Bye-bye.